Riddle me this. What would you get if you crossed one of these with this? It would look a hell of a lot like this. So admittedly, it's been since I think the first Jurassic Park movie was in movie theaters that we saw the last new 4Runner. So this is kind of a big deal, but what does it really mean? Well, the basics. The 4Runner shares the platform with the Tacoma. So that is to say a good thing, but it's also to say a body-on-frame SUV. So this cannot be confused with a Toyota Highlander that you transport Rugrats to and from school, and it drives like a car. This drives like a truck. You know, it's funny, my brother has one of these things. And when people drive in it, they say, oh my God, that thing is so cool. But then after they get out of it, they're like, I can't believe how rough it rides. It's a 4Runner. It's a truck. That's the entire point. Now that we understand that, let's talk about design, because this is a big deal. You guys, a couple of years ago, met Kevin Hunter. This is the guy that runs Toyota Design for the Americas. He is very talented. He actually has been there 25 years, and he's the one leading the design of all the cars you have been seeing from Toyota as of late, the big ones. Like, for example, the Tundra, the Sequoia, the Tacoma, and now this. Now, if you spend any time online looking at forums of these things, people say, oh my God, it's just a Tacoma with a cap. That's the biggest complaint I hear. And when you think about it, you think, how much could they change it from the Tacoma? So one of the big design details you see in the different flavors of 4Runner is the grille. It's kind of the face, kind of like your watch, that tells you what it is. This is the fancy one. That's not a fancy one. That's just the rugged one. But really what's going on here is the C-pillar. If you look at like a third-gen 4Runner, you can kind of see a bit of that here, but then the departure is this kink. Now, Germans would call that the Hofmeister kink, and what they've done here is change the daylight opening. That's what we refer to as this area here. It completely changes the look of the vehicle, so there's a departure. You've seen probably those AI images of the new 4Runner for the past couple of weeks, and usually everybody did the line here because they have no creativity. They're not Kevin and his team in Calty Design down in Newport Beach. So what they've done is just put this kink here and change this piece of glass, which almost looks like it's going over the roof of the vehicle, and that gives a completely different look. Like if you come around to the back, you look at the rear three-quarter, and you see the side is a complete departure. But when you get to the rear three-quarter, you're like, oh, that's definitely a 4Runner. Especially details like the lights here, the way this kind of pops out here. Again, some of these trim pieces will change depending on the version of 4Runner that one goes for. Now, speaking of flavors, this is where it gets incredibly confusing. There are, count 'em, 9 different versions of 4Runner. There's the basic SR5, then we get into the various TRD off-roads, then we get into the TRD Pro, and then there is this, a Trailhunter. Now, you guys probably know of the Trailhunter from the Tacoma episodes we've done. Basically, they've tried to differentiate this from a TRD Pro by making this more an overlanding vehicle, so this has bits that are offered by third parties. So the OEM has worked with companies like ARB or Old Man Emu for the dampers on this, rather than Fox for the dampers on a TRD Pro. So the overall idea here is you're going to have a different application, a different use case of this. And now I can actually share with you some real-world data, because I've driven the TRD Pro and the Trailhunter flavor of Tacoma. And this is where we get into a difference between what we see on paper and the reality where the rubber meets the road. The TRD Pro, we are sold on the idea that is designed to be something fast for dunes. That's why we have the Fox shocks with the overflow reservoirs. This, with the Old Man Emu dampers, you look here, even the top of the wishbone, it says Trailhunter on it. I mean, it's super trick. These things underneath are almost more pretty than they are up top. That's kind of what Sheldon and his team really kind of ensured here. But now that I've spent time behind the wheel, only off-road at this point, it's more confusing. I think this is one of these instances I'm giving you like a public service announcement. Before saying I am going to order this one or I'm going to order a TRD Pro, whether it's a 4Runner or a Tacoma, I would say one needs to drive one extensively before committing to it because the personality is very different. Then we have to get into a party trick. And here we look and we talk some practicality like towing, and we have arrived at the point of the episode where I must sound like a lawyer. Up to, the operative term being up to 6,000 pounds, means including but not limited to the options you select. So it's not a specific powertrain or a specific trim level. It depends on how fancy your vehicle is. So the obvious point here is the less fancy your vehicle is, the more likely that it will have the 6,000 pounds. Then we get to the party trick here. So yes, there is a tailgate here, but we want to get into the idea of what happens here because this is like religion in the 4Runner world. We hit the button here, and it goes down. Hit the button here, it goes up. The Sequoia people beat my ass in the comments because it doesn't do that on a Sequoia anymore. Let me show you again. Goes down, goes up. I'm really glad that worked because I don't want to get yelled at about this again. Then we have to go inside and I have to show you something, again, more lawyerly, actually more practical, even though you guys know I hate practicality. When we talk about practicality, this is the business end of it, no matter whether it's a 4Runner or a Highlander. Here it's a little bit tighter and there's a couple of things going on here depending on the version. There are two different powertrains, we'll get to that a bit later. One's a hybrid and one is just a regular internal combustion engine. The hybrid is not a two-motor hybrid like a Prius, it's a single-motor integrated starter generator motor, but it still has a battery. You need to put that battery somewhere, it goes here. Now, next to this battery is an air compressor in the Trailhunter, there's cup holders back here. Wait a minute, cup holders? Why would you need cup holders when there's a battery here? Well, there's an answer to that. You see, there is a third row on offer. I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, it's only on offer in the gasoline models, no hybrid. So you could have a third row, and thus someone can use the cup holders. There is some storage here, but at the end of the day, this is why you can't have the third row in a hybrid because the battery is taking up that space. And once again, you would complain, like in the Sequoia episodes, that there's no space back here because they're packaging the hybrid. Okay, enough Trailhunter and Limited. Now we have to understand, what's all saying? There's an ass for every seat. Let's find some more seats. Okay, so as we make our way to the TRD Pro, which one could argue is the baddest ass of the 4Runner world, you and I need to spend some time talking about propulsion systems. Yes, I specifically use the term propulsion system because there are two and there's an electric motor involved in one of them. So, no surprise, this will have a 2.4 turbo like the Tacoma. There's going to be a basic one that is 278 horsepower and 317 pounds of torque. Then you can add an electric motor. Now, for the avoidance of doubt, it is not an electric motor like a Prius where it has two electric motors for a hybrid synergy drive. Rather, it's a single motor that sits between the engine and the transmission, and that brings it to 326 horsepower and 465 pounds of torque. Now, something incredibly important to point out. That's a Land Cruiser. They are lovely. But yes, they are the same. They're both built off of the same Tacoma platform. They both have a 2.4 turbo, but that is only on offer as the hybrid. This is on offer as ICE and hybrid. And it's at this point you are probably asking yourself, transmissions. Now you may remember Sheldon Brown, chief engineer of the Tacoma, who was kind enough to give us a manual transmission in certain flavors of Tacoma. Have I mentioned that Sheldon is not the chief engineer of the 4Runner? So you guess what is available and what is not available, which translates to anything you want as long as it's an 8-speed torque converter automatic. Then we get into the different versions here. You see again the grille changes, when we get into a TRD Pro. And notice the big difference here isn't just the hood scoop, but really this classic Toyota heritage grille, which is repeated on the inside of the car. And speaking of the inside of the car, not really any surprises if you have seen the inside of a new Tacoma, which is to say a good thing. It is no longer in the dark ages where you're basically tuning your grandfather's radio. This actually has a screen. I'm not a big fan of the big screens, but that's what the kids want these days. Most importantly, what Kevin and the team, both in Michigan as well as California, they have 2 design studios, they spent time focusing on who would be using it and how would they be using it. So the design, it's definitely better, but they made things more chunky. And we saw this first in the Tundra, then the Sequoia, then the Tacoma. Like, for example, you have these chunky knobs, 3, actually 4 of them when you consider the control system for the all-wheel drive system. But this all uses the same size, and there's a reason for that. You think about using a vehicle like this, it's not going to be like a 100-degree day like we see today. It could be used in Minnesota in the dead of winter, and you're going to have gloves on. That's why you need big knobs and toggle switches. What they did change here is a couple of things. Number one, you look at the toggle switches here, they've dressed them up a bit. They've changed the way in which they look, so it's like a satin finish. And then we go to this knob down here. This is different than, say, in the Land Cruiser. So things like crawl control, things like the locking diffs or the sway bar disconnect, that's all here as opposed to on the Land Cruiser, some of it's up here. So this is a great focal point of the design theme of the overall interior of the vehicle. It's a combination of this knob as well as a toggle switch to go between 2-wheel, 4-wheel high, 4-wheel low, and then this suite of different off-road technologies on 4 buttons up here. You can even dial in the crawl control speed here, which is a nice touch, it's multifunction. But really the important point, and I think the best way to describe this is a story. I recently had to move a lot of dirty stuff. So I borrowed a friend's old GMC pickup truck. And I guess I haven't been in an old car for a while, because you get in cars nowadays and you gotta wait like 30 seconds for them to screen and power up and all this kind of stuff. What they've done here is, yeah, they've given you the screen, but they have knobs and hard controllers for HVAC, so you can immediately get in the vehicle and switch on and off important applications. Okay, now that we got all the responsible adult stuff out of the way, let's focus on some party tricks. One we have seen in the Tacoma, specifically a TRD Pro tech review we did, a speaker that is removable, a Bluetooth speaker, and you can connect these things obviously to the car. However, a little bit behind the scenes here at this event, the JBL guy came and he brought 7 of these things and connected them, like daisy chained them, all Bluetooth, and it made it like an outdoor concert. Kind of a neat trick. It's something I probably want to spend some more time playing with. And then something not making the trip from the Tacoma, the TRD Pro specifically. You saw in that tech review there was an isodynamic seat. That's a very fancy term for an 18-wheeler seat, basically a shock absorber in the seat that works in conjunction with the shock absorbers, the Fox, in the TRD Pro to make it more usable when you're high-speed off-road. I honestly thought this thing was a gimmick. But now that I've driven the TRD Pro at speed, I got to tell you, it's not a gimmick. And it's not really about the going up and down. It's about how you sit in the vehicle and interact with the vehicle. When you sit in a Tacoma, and I would say a 4Runner now, in the normal seats, it kind of feels of like Tacomas and 4Runners of the past, even though it's a different design. That new seat, it changes the way you feel, the sight picture, everything about the vehicle. That's where we get to the bad news. That is Tacoma only. Now, yes, you and I could spend a hell of a lot more time talking about this thing. However, they didn't give us all the details. They're saving that for a little bit later in the year. And I got basically 20 minutes with all these vehicles, so this was a marathon of putting this thing together. So we need to kind of close on this. Land Cruiser and 4Runner, now that we see what the 4Runner is. I know in all the Land Cruiser episodes, you guys were saying, why do they need both? And if I'm taking a stab in the dark, there's number one, that this can be a third row. At least in the US, one cannot get a third row over there. And then number two, that is only on offer as hybrid and only on offer as full-time 4-wheel drive. So this might be more up to the duty of Practicality, although I wouldn't consider this the most practical vehicle for people with small rugrats. This is, again, for like my brother who has teenage nephews and takes them to the beach in Oregon in this. They love it. That's the kind of car it is. But then there's also a differentiation of this is a 4Runner. It's a religion for some people, and that's a Land Cruiser, and that's a religion for other people. So put another way, this is the church down the street, and this would be the temple down the street, or this could be the church and that could be the temple. Basically what I'm saying, these two things are differing religions. People have very, very strong opinions about them. It's like Coke versus Pepsi, Mac versus Windows, Android versus iOS. And now that we understand the differences, because we've seen this, there was a lot of speculation before this, we know how Toyota's at least trying to tell the story. They're saying this one could be gas, or gas and hybrid. This can be part-time four-wheel drive and a third seat. This one can only be hybrid, and this one can only be four-wheel drive. So then we get also into the pricing, and that's where we get into kind of a big differentiation. That we know starts, 56, goes to the mid-70s. This one, a current gen, is 41, and it goes up to high 50s. I gotta believe they're probably gonna raise the price on this. They did on the Tacoma, but not by much. So this is where we get into a debate. Why would you choose this over this? Or why would you choose that over that? And it's more than just the name, because I know Land Cruiser and 4Runner have strong followings. Let me know in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoMan TV all one word, MotoMan TV all one word, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Now, if you found value in this episode, I would highly suggest you check out another Toyota episode, but this not working in conjunction with an embargo or a reveal. Myself and Andre from TFL Truck, we got a Toyota Sequoia, basically this exact one here, a TRD Pro, and we put it on the rack. And we basically tell you the story of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And Andre was very honest about that, about the Sequoia TRD. That was an off-road, not a pro. You can check out that episode here. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.